What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today with the Week 13 running back starts and sits. As I do every week, we're getting into crunch time right now, which is, prime playoff pushes. Maybe you've already secured a playoff spot. Regardless, you need to know what's happening in each backfield, where the usage is going, where the targets and the carries, etc., snap share is going. That's what we cover on Wednesday videos. It's not just simply start this guy or sit this guy. I also tell you the trends and the usage in each backfield. So before we get into this, if you guys learned something, if you get some value from this video, I encourage you to hit the like button. It helps the channel grow, helps us out tremendously. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Click the notification bell so you're notified anytime we post a video, and comment any of your thoughts down below as well. We're going to hit the intro and then we're going to get right into this. Okay, so as I always do, as you guys can see on the screen, I created this matchup chart, which basically weighs rank and fantasy points allowed, adjusted per schedule, rank and rush defense DVOA, and receiving fantasy points allowed, meaning receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. And I've listed all the running backs this week and their opponent based on the matchup that they have. I also tweeted this out, so if you want to see a bigger version of it, you can go to my Twitter at footballstock on the screen. Follow me over on there, and you guys will see that. And I tweet out a bunch of other stuff too, so make sure you're following along. And I'll leave it on top of the screen right now so that you guys can see it as I go through each matchup. Instead of saying that, X matchup is very good, you guys can kind of just make reference to it as I'm talking about that game. So we're going to start with the teams on bye, of course. Green Bay, Cleveland, Tennessee, and Carolina. A couple fantasy relevant running backs, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, etc. in that mix. Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon, that you will not be able to use this week. So we are going to have to dig a little bit deeper than usual. We're going to start with Thursday Night Football, Cowboys at Saints. In this game, you're going to be starting Ezekiel Elliott and starting Alvin Kamara. We know what these guys' roles are, so I'm not going to really cover that. But injuries are a big deal for both of these guys right now. Zeke Elliott has, had talks the last week or so that he's going to be limited, or, they're going to dial back his workload because he's dealing with injuries, et cetera, et cetera. Zeke Elliott was a full participant in practice on Tuesday. Final practice reports will come out today, Wednesday, as I'm recording this. But I expect Zeke Elliott to play, and I expect Zeke Elliott to get his full workload. I'm not really concerned about starting him one bit. It is a tough matchup, as is the other side of things for Alvin Kamara. But I'm still trusting that Ezekiel Elliott being on the field, being as durable of a running back as he's been over his career, is going to get his full workload. So no concerns about starting Zeke Elliott as a top 12 running back this week. Alvin Kamara, of course, is a little bit more of a question mark from a health perspective. Initially, we heard when he first missed his first game that this was only going to be a 1-week thing. He's now missed 3 games, and Kamara practiced in a limited fashion on Tuesday. Ingram practiced in full on Tuesday. If Kamara can't go, of course, you fire up Mark Ingram, but I'm expecting Alvin Kamara to probably make his return in this one, but who knows? It is a Thursday night game. They did play on Thursday last week, so it's not like it's a short week or anything, but they could be enticed by the 10 days rest type of thing. But the Saints, in their own right, are trying to fight for a playoff spot right now. So it's not like they're, where the Saints usually are, where they're resting their starters for a full, playoff schedule and a full playoff workload come the time that it matters throughout the season. This is a team that is trying to get into the dance right now. So if Kamara's healthy to play, I think he's going to be on the field getting his full workload. Like I said, neither defense has been very favorable against the run. Both of them are red matchups, as you guys can see above me. So neither guy I'm expecting for a huge game, but both are in my starting lineup nonetheless. Colts at Texans, the first game that we have at the 1 p.m. slate. Of course, you're going to be starting Jonathan Taylor. He's my RB1 on the week. This matchup is much easier than the Bills and the Bucs defenses that JT has performed well against, obviously against the Bills the last 2 games. So this matchup should be a lot easier for Jonathan Taylor, which is a scary sight for yours truly, because I do have to play against him this week, which is not going to be fun for me. And then Rex Burkhead on the other side of things and David Johnson. I think Rex Burkhead has actually carved himself out a usable role. And when I say usable, I mean, like, if you're in a pinch, you lost DeAndre Swift, you have Nick Chubb on bye type of thing. Go grab Burkhead. Maybe he's on your waiver wire right now, and throw him into your flex and use him as a desperation play. So don't start this guy unless you absolutely need to. But based on the usage that you guys can see on the screen right now, he actually has carved himself out a usable role where he's getting about, 15, 20 carries a game and a couple targets here and there, to the point that even in a bad offense, this is a guy that could get into the end zone, be a 15 point per game type of score if he's able to command some goal line work. So Rex Burkhead, if you need him this week, not a terrible option. You could definitely do worse. Vikings at Lions, the next game that we're going to talk about here. And of course, this is the battle of the backups game. Alexander Mattison and Jamal Williams, both expected to be in, big workloads this week. Alexander Mattison saw 30 opportunities in the 2 games that Dalvin Cook missed earlier this season in week 3 and week 5. And like I said, all the usage that you'd want to see out of Alexander Mattison is what he saw. 68% of the snaps, 66% of the snaps, saw a majority of the carries, majority of the routes, highly targeted when he was out there running routes as well, and also saw the inside the 5 work, short down and distance. The only problem was he didn't actually get a whole lot of the 2-minute drill and long down and distance snaps, but neither does Dalvin Cook, to be honest. So either way, I think you're throwing Mattison into your lineup as a top 10 running back as long as Dalvin Cook is out, and especially in this matchup against the Lions defense that has been a little bit better as of late against the run, but is still not a matchup that I'm scared of. And then Jamal Williams, we just actually got report right now, before I started recording this, that DeAndre Swift could be out for a couple of weeks, right? Dr. Edwin Porras, when the injury happened, labeled the injury recovery as 10 days, which would put him at this Sunday, which would be 10 days from the Thursday that he suffered the injury. But what he said was a caveat, basically, is that this should be a 2 to 3 week injury. And if it's just one game that he misses, DeAndre Swift, then fantasy owners should, sigh in relief because he expects him to be out probably until week 15, week 16. Good for fantasy playoffs, hopefully, for those of us like myself who have DeAndre Swift and need him for the fantasy playoffs. We do have Jamal Williams in relief, and I, of course, do have Jamal Williams on my roster as a DeAndre Swift owner. I did pick him up like 2 weeks ago before the stretch run, knowing that DeAndre Swift is a running back with a big workload. Maybe he breaks down or gets injured. I do have his replacement in my lineup going forward. We can expect Jamal Williams, in my opinion, to see about 65, 75% of the snaps and a similar workload to what we saw DeAndre Swift. The only difference, of course, being that this is still a bad offense. This is still not that great of a situation, but Jamal Williams should get enough volume to be able to make him a consistent back-end RB2, but he's not as good as DeAndre Swift, so he's not going to be nearly as effective as DeAndre Swift was with his touches. Looks like Swift should be back for the fantasy playoffs. The only concern now, though, is that the Detroit Lions are not a winning team. The state of their team is obviously terrible. They're going to have the first overall pick. So are they going to shut Swift down in week 15 if they're, 0-13 and 1 or whatever? Or are they going to, because it's not a lower body injury or anything that you're overly concerned with him re-injuring? If he's ready to go, I imagine they're probably going to want to get him back into the lineup. So not too concerned with them shutting him down for the season. But as you guys can see on the screen, Jamal Williams was heavily involved when DeAndre Swift went out of the lineup. So that is something that is encouraging to see. And of course, DeAndre Swift did play 20% of the snaps. So that number should be up around 75%. With DeAndre Swift out of the lineup entirely. So Giants at Dolphins, the next game that we're going to talk about here. In this game, you're going to start Saquon Barkley, start Myles Gaskin. Workload-wise, Saquon Barkley was back to his full self. We got to see him back to his full self from an efficiency and a talent standpoint, but from a workload perspective, you saw 87% of the snaps, good majority of the carries, routes were up there, targets, short down and distance, long down and distance, etc. He was back to his full workload. So the ramp up period from a workload perspective is completely over with coming off of that injury. Now we need to see him ramp up from an efficiency and a talent perspective, start to become more efficient on the ground, break off a couple big plays like we know Saquon Barkley is capable of doing, but he is absolutely in my lineup this week. On the other side of things, we do have Myles Gaskin, who I told you guys to sit last week. I think the rationale was warranted. This was a guy that did see his lowest snaps in a couple weeks, 50% of the snaps. Didn't see a whole lot of the carries as well because Philip Lindsay, who they recently claimed off of waivers, already made an impact. And if you can trade/sell Myles Gaskin before this backfield becomes more split, I would absolutely do that. Of course, a lot of you guys have probably already had your trade deadlines. So Myles Gaskin, to me, low-end RB2 going forward, is going to have some value because they're using him in the red zone, and that's where he's going to get his value from. But he is kind of in a split backfield where he's splitting either pass catching work with Patrick Laird or early down work with Philip Lindsay. So not a guy that I'm overly excited about. If you do have a chance to sell him, you haven't had your trade deadline yet, I would try and do that coming off of a couple big weeks. Buccaneers at Falcons, the next game that we're going to talk about here. Both of these guys absolutely on tears right now, Leonard Fournette and Cordero Patterson. Fournette's seen an uptick in usage the past couple of weeks. He's taken over the 3-down role completely. And the one thing that we knew about Leonard Fournette for most of the season was that he was going to be like a 65% snap share running back, get the majority of the work, but he's commanded all of the long down and distance and 2-minute drill work the last 2 weeks, basically making Gio Bernard useless in terms of his role. And I hope you bought low on this dude in all formats because we did talk about it in Dynasty as well. Because not only is he going to win some people some championships this year, he's also going to get re-signed by Tampa Bay. As a Tampa Bay fan, I firmly believe they're going to offer him a contract in the Chris Carson, Melvin Gordon range of price. They're not going to, break the bank for the guy, but I imagine he's probably going to get a decent contract, 3-year deal with like 12 million per or something like that. I could definitely see Leonard Fournette commanding that type of money from Tampa Bay because he clearly fits this offense. Tom Brady clearly trusts him. And he's playing a lot better, similar to what we saw in his first couple of years in Jacksonville. So now moving on to Cordarrelle Patterson, he's actually been an RB1 this season on less than 50% of the snaps, which is an absolutely wild number to me. 43% of the snaps is what he's played this season. He and Deebo Samuel are perfect examples of outliers. And I actually tweeted out like a mini thread of this earlier today. We usually want to trust usage and ability to command volume with players, right? Because we want to separate the ability of the player from what their coaching staff has to like manufacture for them. Because typically, and I say this again, as a general rule, we don't want to have to rely on coaching staffs to give wide receivers and running backs hybrids like what we have with Patterson and Deebo the majority of their touches. We want them to be good enough players to command volume, command carries, etc. Deebo and Patterson are both, being elevated and aided by the fact that their coaching staffs are manufacturing touches, which typically doesn't go over well, like I talked about. And we don't usually want to have to rely on this. Laviska Shenault, Rondale Moore, both would be very successful in roles similar to this, but we are seeing that their coaching staffs aren't willing to use them in that way as what we've seen with Deebo and Cordarrelle Patterson. So mini tangent aside, of course, you are starting Cordarrelle Patterson this week, but just as an offseason thing to keep in the back of your mind, just remember that if you're going to be really high on Laviska Shenault or something next year, just remember that this Cordarrelle Patterson thing that we're seeing is rare. It doesn't usually happen. And before you can buy into somebody like that, you need to know that that coaching staff is fully capable of using somebody to their fullest potential and using them and manufacturing them touches consistently. Because it's one thing for, off-season buzz to come out next year that Laviska Shenault is going to get more design touches and more carries and screens or whatever. It's another thing to see it consistently, which is what we're seeing with Patterson and with Deebo Samuel. So again, mini tangent aside, just thought that was an interesting piece of like macro analysis going forward into the offseason, because we are going to hear things like he's the next Cordarrelle Patterson coming into next year. And I just wanted to kind of nip that in the butt before it starts happening. Anyway, Eagles at Jets. Flex Miles Sanders if he plays, sit all the Jets running backs if you can help it. We saw a 3-way timeshare in New York without Michael Carter, which was completely gross. I'm not even going to go over it, but I'd still go with Ty Johnson if you had to start one of these Jets running backs. Top 10 in receiving fantasy points allowed to running backs are the Philadelphia Eagles. And the matchup that they had last week was not a good matchup for receiving running backs for Ty Johnson against the Texans. So it makes sense that if he's going to be valuable, it's going to be in the passing game. And as you guys can see, he was still getting the majority of the pass catching work, routes and stuff like that. So I do expect him to be valuable to some extent in the passing game. And this game profiles as one that should be better. But of course, the targets weren't necessarily there with Zach Wilson as they were with the other quarterbacks. So Miles Sanders on the other side of things hasn't been ruled out by the Eagles. We did see him get banged up last week, suffered an ankle injury or re-aggravated his ankle injury. Might make sense to rest him if he's quote unquote sore, according to Nick Sirianni, which is the most recent report we have about Miles Sanders' condition. In that case, I think Boston Scott becomes a top 20 play. Playing against the New York Jets, which is basically a cake matchup. It's the easiest matchup in the league for fantasy running backs without Miles Sanders if he doesn't play, and without Jordan Howard if he doesn't play as well. Boston Scott's going to be a guy that's, for one, mega chalk in DFS, and another guy that is going to be very good for you in season long if you do have him on your roster, if he's on your waiver wire or something like that. So Eagles running backs, definitely something to monitor with that situation. Cardinals at Bears, this one's pretty straightforward. Start David Montgomery, start James Conner. Montgomery will not keep up this up and down play that he's seeing right now. The usage is borderline Najee Harris level. As you guys can see on the screen, 85% of the snaps pretty much in every game that he's played since he's come back from injury. He is the number one buy low candidate at running back. If you guys haven't had your trade deadline yet, or if your trade deadline's today, which a lot of people expressed that December 1st was their trade deadline, go send offers for David Montgomery, because I'm telling you right now, this down play that he's experiencing right now will not keep up. Once Justin Fields is back on the field, which might be next week or the week after, who knows, David Montgomery is going to be very, very valuable for fantasy. James Conner is in a similar boat. As long as Chase Edmonds is out, and we don't know if he's going to be back for the fantasy playoffs or not, but as of right now, James Conner is a workhorse back. If you have James Conner and you don't need immediate wins, you're more so, maybe you're 10-2 or something like that, and you're looking towards the fantasy playoffs, I'd be looking to sell him right now, looking to flip him for someone like DeAndre Swift or Aaron Jones or somebody like that. That could be better for the fantasy playoffs than what James Conner is going to present if Chase Edmonds returns to the lineup. So that's what I'd be looking to do with James Conner. If you need wins, just ride him out. use him. He's going to be very good until Chase Edmonds comes back. But once Chase Edmonds comes back, we have to imagine it goes back to the old, roles that we saw throughout the majority of the season, where Chase Edmonds was getting the pass catching work. James Conner was the goal line back end, and they were both valuable, but not as valuable as James Conner is right now with no Chase Edmonds. So Chargers at Bengals. This one will be very straightforward. Start them both. But both Joe Mixon and Austin Eckler represent the last of the early remaining running backs that haven't gotten injured yet. And other than Jonathan Taylor, they're the only ones that have been very, very productive as well. We're starting to see Antonio Gibson kind of pick things up as well. But these guys both were, early round picks that have definitely worked out for people. They get everything that their offenses ask of them: the early down work, the goal line work, the receiving work, everything that you could want out of these guys is what they get. And they're both top 5 running backs for me this week. I think they actually might both be in my top 3 along with Jonathan Taylor. So to the 4 p.m. games, Jaguars at Rams, we have James Robinson and Darrell Henderson. James Robinson has actually seen his role shrink in recent weeks, something to monitor for sure. Still an RB2 type, but I've kind of talked him up as a guy that was consistently in that top 15 range. Whereas now we're starting to see him play like barely 60% of the snaps and cede work to Carlos Hyde in the passing game, especially long down and distance and 2-minute drill, as you guys can see on the screen. And that's definitely going to hinder him, especially playing in a bad offense that is going to be playing from behind a lot. If you don't have the 2-minute drill and the long down and distance work in the Jaguars offense, it's going to be a problem for James Robinson fantasy managers. Darrell Henderson on the other side of things is dealing with a quad injury right now. If he were to miss this game, we saw Sony Michel back in week 3 command 24 opportunities against the Tampa Bay Bucks when Henderson missed with a rib injury. So if Henderson is out, start Sony Michel. If Henderson plays, obviously you're going to be starting him. Moving on to the Washington football team at Las Vegas Raiders. In this game, you're going to start Antonio Gibson, start Josh Jacobs, and low-end flex J.D. McKissic if he plays. Of course, we did see him suffer an injury towards the end of the Monday Night Football game, but it doesn't sound like it was too big of a deal. It sounds like he should be back for this game. But either way, 36 motherfucking touches for Antonio Gibson. That is what I am talking about as an Antonio Gibson fantasy manager. The underlying usage was as good as it looked as well. 67% of the snaps and 50% of the team's routes, which is the highest number since week 1 for Antonio Gibson. Now, of course, J.D. McKissic did miss a couple plays at the end of the game, but either way, even if that was 45%, that's still one of the higher numbers since the early part of the season. It seems as if Antonio Gibson is finally healthy. And I think if Antonio Gibson was healthy the whole season, I think we would have been talking about a guy, and I firmly believe this, that could have been a league winner, could have been up where Jonathan Taylor is in terms of his production right now. Now with no injury designation heading into games, he was not questionable. He wasn't, limited practicing most of the week, designated for the shin injury that he had most of the season that he's been dealing with. Antonio Gibson looks like he's finally healthy, and it looks like Washington is finally rewarding him with the workload I think he would have gotten if he was healthy coming into the season. So great news for Antonio Gibson. He could be a guy that wins people leagues down the stretch. If you guys bought him at his lowest point, he was going for nothing at some point. People were done with him. They were fed up. I told you guys that I would be holding, and that is why, because I just thought he needed to get healthier, and the bye week was a big part of that. Starting to get a little bit healthier, starting to get some rest. Regardless, let's move on to the Raiders side of things. With Josh Jacobs, we know his usage by now could be a good game script for him against a rough and tumble Washington football team. So he's a top 24 guy for me on the week. Moving on to the Ravens at Steelers. In this game, we have Najee Harris, of course, who you're going to be starting, and low-end flex Devontae Freeman. Some of you might be scared of Najee Harris right now, but I'm telling you, don't be. He's similar to a guy like David Montgomery. The underlying usage is what we chase in fantasy. We got to hope for some efficiency, got to hope for some scoring out of this Steelers offense, which we're not seeing right now. Hopefully they can turn it around. But I'm not worried whatsoever about Najee Harris. And if you guys haven't had your trade deadline yet, go out and send some offers for him coming off of 2 down weeks. Maybe the opposing manager is a little bit worried about Najee Harris. On the Ravens side of things, we have Devontae Freeman, who to me is now in low-end flex territory at best. I knew this would catch up eventually. I've kind of been talking about it for a couple of weeks. With Latavius Murray back on the field, running his full allotment of snaps, and Lamar Jackson, of course, taking away the majority of carries like he does, Devontae Freeman had a down game. And I hope you guys enjoyed usable Devontae Freeman, because basically what he is at this point is a touchdown or bust RB3. As you guys can see on the screen, him and Latavius Murray virtually split snaps. He did out-carry him by a decent margin, but again, 40% of the rush attempts because of Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson takes away a good portion of those, and he's not going to run a whole lot of routes, not going to be heavily involved in the passing game as well. So that is something you got to monitor with Devontae Freeman. He's still usable. He's still functional as an RB3 low-end flex play, but that's about it, what you're getting with him. He was producing like an RB2 before that, and that's not what you're going to be getting out of him now. So again, if you can sell him, go ahead and sell him. If not, just hold on to him and probably keep him on your bench for the most part. 49ers at Seahawks. In this game, you're going to be starting Elijah Mitchell and sitting all the Seattle Seahawks players. Elijah Mitchell is just fantastic, obviously coming off of a career game. With Deebo Samuel out, maybe we actually see him get a little bit more involved in the passing game. With Deebo out for some of the game last week, we saw him, I think he had like 5 or 6 targets in this game. And we know that he's a Kyle Shanahan guy, right? Kyle Shanahan kind of operates like a pseudo Patriots offense where he has his dudes and they get the majority of the work. Deebo Samuel is clearly one of his guys. Elijah Mitchell, clearly one of his guys. So he might see an uptick with Deebo Samuel now out. Of course, we know Deebo was carrying the ball a decent amount, 5, 6, 7 times a game. So that could stand to benefit the bottom line of a guy like Elijah Mitchell. So he is in your starting lineup regardless. And we saw the Seahawks get absolutely gashed by both Gibson and McKissick this past Monday night. So great matchup for him. And then on the Seahawks side of things, just sit them. They're in a bad matchup against a top 5 run defense in San Francisco this week. And we've seen Collins be inefficient. We've seen the other guys be involved to some degree. I'm just, avoiding the headache. It's a divisional matchup. Russell Wilson isn't playing well, so that's no longer a draw to this offense, as at least he's the starting running back for the Russell Wilson-led Seahawks. Not really that important right now. So moving on to the primetime games, we have Sunday Night Football, Broncos at Chiefs. In this game, you're going to be starting Javonte Williams and probably also Clyde Edwards-Helaire as well. Flex Melvin Gordon if you guys need to. Javonte Williams stands. Let's take a bow. Let's stand up. We have arrived. Javonte Williams' season is officially here. No, it is not elite RB1 usage like we could have thought, like we saw Cam Akers do last year. But Javonte Williams has officially surpassed Melvin Gordon as the most valuable Broncos running back. And here's why. As you guys can see on the screen, they're splitting carries. They're still getting split carries. We saw Melvin Gordon actually out-carry Javonte Williams this past week, but the passing game usage is the important thing, right? This is not that great of a team. The Broncos are not going to, win 11, 12 games this year. They're about a mediocre team. So they're going to be in some negative game scripts here and there. And Javonte Williams is the passing down back on this team. We've seen in recent weeks, going back to week 9, where Javonte Williams matched him in routes. Now he's running more routes than Melvin Gordon, and he's probably getting a lot better in pass protection, things of that nature, and he's commanding targets. And that's the important part with Javonte Williams. So no, he's not going to be a 75% snap share workhorse RB1, but he is about a 60% snap share running back, getting the valuable volume in his offense, which includes the inside the 5 attempts as well. We did see Melvin Gordon get it this week, but he is a guy that is going to command it here and there. It's been about a 50-50 split on the inside the 5 work throughout the season. And that's important to know that he is getting also the valuable receiving work, and he's starting to get the 2-minute drill and long down and distance snaps as well. So great news for Javonte Williams, people. He is a guy that has worked his way inside a top 24 running back range consistently going forward each and every week. And this matchup is pretty easy for him. Clyde Edwards-Helaire on the other side of things didn't see great usage on his first game back before the bye week, but I expect him to regain his old role, go back to about a 60% snap share running back. He's going to be involved in the rushing game, of course, but not heavily involved on the goal line, not heavily involved in the receiving game. We have seen Darrell Williams, even when Clyde Edwards-Helaire was healthy, be involved more so than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So something to monitor going forward, but I still think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a guy that you can start because he's going to consistently get 15 plus carries per game. See, I said something nice about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Anyway, moving on to Monday Night Football, the final game of the week, Patriots at Bills. Nobody is a smash play in this game. I can keep this one pretty simple, but anybody can be played. I would say if I had to rank everybody in this game, Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, Matt Breida, and then Devin Singletary is how I would rank them. The Bills deactivated Zach Moss this past week on the Thanksgiving game, leading to Devin Singletary running the starting role, running 68% of the snaps, but Matt Breida getting the shine, getting the valuable volume, seeing some receiving work as well. So will this shift to a 50-50 split? Is Zach Moss going to be inactive again, or is he going to be playing, and how does that shake things up? We'll have to kind of wait and see, but on Monday, if I can help it, I don't really want to start any of these guys, but if you do need a top 30 running back play, I do think Matt Breida just slides his way into that territory. And same goes for the Patriots running backs. This is a bad matchup. The Bills have been very good against the run, sans Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor this year. So this is a 3-way timeshare between Ramondre Stevenson, Damian Harris, and Brandon Bolden. All these guys are getting some volume, and none of them are getting elite volume. They're about 15 touch per game type of running backs. So neither of them have to be in your lineup, but if you do have some bye weeks this week, I'm okay starting either Damian Harris or Ramondre Stevenson as a top 30 running back. So as I mentioned, if you guys did learn something, get some value from this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new, comment any of your thoughts down below. If you want access to my weekly rankings for running back, they are now free for the rest of the season. You guys can get that link in the description. I'll try and update them on a daily basis. So peace out, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.